You can forget a lot of things, Foster Care Nation, but never forget this. You're listening to Unparalleled Studios.
I signal.
Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey with Jason. No, Amanda. Sorry, guys. Like it happens a lot of times, she's off doing adult stuff and I'm over here playing on the computer. So, she would rather do adult stuff. I would rather play on the computer. So that's what you get, is just me today. If I sound a little bit off, I'm sorry today, guys. You're going to have me with a bit of a cold. So I know I sound funny. I'm about a half octave deeper today for some reason, but that's just what God decided to give me to work with today. So I'm going to work with that. But in order to not kill myself too awful bad by talking the whole time, I make sure that we try to always bring in a guest who has something interesting to say and has an amazing story to go with it. So today we have Kyle Maurer. Hopefully I said the last name right. I usually ask ahead of time, and I didn't today. So how are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great. And I want to thank you, Jason, for your commitment to your loyal audience here, coming in under the weather on a holiday, everything. I admire your level of commitment.
Hey, all I have to do is sit in a chair and talk. This is way easier than chasing kids around the house.
It's not a bad gig, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, no, today we actually had 3 interviews scheduled for today, and a couple of them did not happen to make it because, Kyle, you signed up for a day that happened to be Labor Day, and I didn't even think about it until I looked at it today. I was like, yeah, we were supposed to have 3 interviews today, and it's on a holiday. So thanks for showing up on a holiday, on a traditional day off for most people where you're out doing fun stuff. I don't know about where you're at in the world, but where we're at, it's kind of cold and wet and rainy. And so it's no fun outside today.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. I spent the first half of the day splitting wood with the kids, and now my back is sore, and I don't mind sitting in a chair and talking for a little while.
Oh, man, it has been a long time since I split any wood, man, and I am not jealous of that at all.
It wasn't all that bad, actually. The kids were kind of helpful. You give them a purpose, and they're happy.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
I have 6 kids right now. I have 2 5-year-olds, 1 4-year-old, 2 2-year-olds, and a 4-month-old.
I don't believe they're terribly helpful.
I got to give them a little credit today. They did their best. They carried some logs from one pile to another pile. And I think in the end of the day, they saved me a little bit of effort. I think they did. So I'll give them that. I'm grateful. And it kept them busy and out of mom's hair for quite a while.
I remember at about 7 years old, I think I was. We lived out in the backwoods of Tennessee when I was a young kid, and we heated our home with wood heat. And I remember being the one who was out there trying to help, quote unquote, help. And yeah, I'll give my dad credit because he let me skip school to come help cutting wood and stuff. And so that was pretty awesome when you're in 2nd grade and that's what you're doing for that whole like skipping school thing. But it was a good time. And except for I have one really, really vivid memory of when he was tossing wood into a pile. That was my job, just like you mentioned, carrying wood from this pile to that pile. And he realized that as he let go of the chunk of wood to toss it over to the pile, and he wanted to warn me, so he hollered my name, and as I looked up, it hit me square in the nose.
Oh, no.
And
Jason, oh, no.
I don't think Zoom picks it up, the video picks it up, but there's still a little bit of a scar right there from where I got smacked in the nose pretty good on that one. But yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Building memories, right? Building memories.
Yeah. The kids somehow, you're right. They do have this tendency to stand exactly where I'm trying to throw the logs. I split the log and there's always a kid right there, right in the way.
I think as kids, we all have that tendency to just be in the way. So.
It's a gift.
Yeah. God knows I did.
Yeah.
So, all right. Now 6 kids, we may or may not in the near future have number 8 staying with us long term. We have 7. And so I'm just going to go ahead and say that 6 puts you on the crazy spectrum.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So 6 kids. I mean, what does that look like for you? Because I read your bio, so I happen to know enough to know that your kids are kind of like mine and not all like the old fashioned kind.
Sure. Yeah, you could say that. That's right. All 6 of them are either adopted or in the process of being adopted. And you, I don't know if you, when you say crazy, you mean that we're crazy because we're probably going crazy in this environment, or we were crazy to get ourselves into this situation. Maybe both might be true, but um, it as is so often the case, it's not like this wasn't exactly the plan. But things don't go according to plan when you sign up for adoption or foster care, and things have worked out well enough, and we're happy with our situation. But this is not what we envisioned, or what anyone envisioned at any point in the process.
It rarely is. It rarely is. So, are you married?
We are married. Yeah, my wife and I have been married for 13 years.
I certainly hope you have some help there, because 6 kids is outnumbered for a pair of parents, but if a single parent, that would be way difficult numbers to manage.
I just can't even imagine.
Yes, I feel you. I feel you, man. So what brought you into this world of foster care and adoption? Was that something that was in your family growing up, in your wife's family, or what did that look like when you guys first started talking about it?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it was a little bit a part of our family. My mother was adopted, and my wife's mother was adopted. And both of us, my wife and I, coincidentally grew up in households where we had biological siblings, but also a adopted cousin who came in to live with us. So my family did, and my wife's family did. So we had these things in common. And so it was a part of our life. It wasn't something that was so in our face that we were conscious of it all the time, but we were well aware of it. But it was only after we struggled with infertility for some years, for about 8 years into our marriage, that we really started to seriously have conversations about this. We wanted to have a family. We wanted to have kids. My wife especially felt that was her purpose in life, and to not have kids that late into our marriage, she felt directionless, lacking that purpose, and it was a real struggle. We started to have serious conversations about adoption, and we signed up after exploring a few different agencies. We signed up with one in 2014, I should say, and we talked to a lot of adoptive families. We learned a lot about what the different stories were to kind of set our expectations going into this new. We didn't know anybody who. We were actually still in our 20s at this time. So we were far younger than really any of our peers and the cohorts going through the adoption process, and didn't know much of anybody who could relate to our situation. And so we went out of our way to talk to a lot of people to set our expectations. And we talked to family after family who waited maybe several months before they were chosen. Their profile was chosen to be an adoptive family, and that was kind of what our benchmark was and what we expected. Like at any moment after we were a waiting family in the pool, we thought we could have a child at any time, and we got to be ready. We got to be ready at any time. And then 3 years went by quite quickly.
Oh.
And there were occasions in which we had to respond to a situation and where something was on our radar, but we were never picked in that time. And it felt very long. And we were honestly quite discouraged after those 3 years that we still had not been picked by a single mother. And then suddenly we were. Suddenly we were in the summer of 2017. And we met our first birth mother. And we had about 1 month notice before our first daughter was born, and we got to be there at the hospital and come in right after our daughter was born, take her home from the hospital days later. And that was a wonderful story for us. Everything worked out as perfectly as it can in that situation. We felt very blessed to be matched with a birth mother as amicable and cooperative and supportive and sweet and loving in every possible way, parenting already 2 other older children of her own. And the rest of her family welcomed us as a part of their family, which has been amazing. Even to this day, our birth mother's family treats us like members of their family and supports us in every possible way. And we visit them on out-of-state trips and have holidays with them and so on in this wonderful situation. And that was really the start of this journey that we ended up on, this unparalleled journey, you might say.
Yeah, wow. It's you don't find many stories that have that much smoothness. Seeming it took a while, but some smoothness to walk right into it. So it sounds like it's maybe an open adoption.
Absolutely, it is. Yes.
Yeah. Now I'm curious because, all right, I was raised by old school parents, and I have some old school tendencies in me that sometimes are good and helpful and wonderful and beneficial, and sometimes are not. And I grew up in a world where adoption was one of those things that everybody always tried to keep that quiet. You didn't want to talk about that. That wasn't something we just didn't talk about that. And so it was the thing. Closed adoption was the only thing for decades. I mean,
very true.
And so, what has that been like for you, having an open adoption? Because I hear enough people talk about it and advocate for that, and having had enough kids now who we've adopted and seen how that effect has gone from very young kids to teenagers. Like that's important. So what's that been like for your family?
Yeah. Wow. What a topic, and a topic that I've become unexpectedly quite passionate about, and could talk for quite a while on this. I think the first thing that I think about is my mother and my wife's mother. As I mentioned before, both of them were adopted, and we were able to observe the difference in their stories, because both were originally closed adoptions, but my wife's mother eventually, in her early adult life, was able to get acquainted with her birth parents and establish a relationship with them that continues to this day. And that was very positive for her. And the differences in those experiences have been striking to my wife and I. We've had many conversations just observing how different it is for my mother, who had never had an opportunity to meet any of her birth family, and her mother, who did, and was able to establish that relationship and was able to settle those questions that one grows up wrestling with. And I think she's more well-adjusted and able to just adapt and be and find peace in a lot of things because of the settling of those questions and that relationship, and not wrestling with identity questions in the same way. So I think about our mothers and the differences in the experiences they had, and then how our experience has been. Obviously, we went through a lot of education in the process leading up to our adoption. And so the agencies that we interviewed 3 or 4 different agencies, and probably a dozen different families from those agencies, and all the caseworkers. And without exception, everyone is everyone is advocating for open adoption in every case. And there's reason for this. What the industry, if you will, has shifted its mentality in 180 degrees completely over recent decades. And now there isn't anyone pushing for closed adoption anymore. And that's because we have a lot of history and a lot of stories, and we have learned, and everyone who spoke in our education process who had been through this talked at length about the differences and experiences, and we were very sold from firsthand encounters that we had. And then our story only confirms what we believed, that open adoptions are much healthier and better for all parties involved. Maybe ours was just by chance happened to be particularly cooperative and positive, and a birth family that we just like. We have no qualms with having a long-term relationship with this family, because they are a stable, well-adjusted, loving, supportive, and cooperative and loving, just a wonderful family all around. The kind of people that we would just love to have in our lives, regardless of the situation. So yes, our first birth family has been great, and having an open relationship with them has, obviously our kids are still young, but I think it is a healthy for them, and kids just have this wonderful capacity for coming to terms with things. That we explain something that we as adults have we've turned things into taboos. We've made things uncomfortable that don't need to be. Kids they just accept it, and our kids just say, "Oh, that's it. That's how it is. Okay, she gave birth to me. You're my mom and dad. That's how it works. Okay, what's for lunch?" That's it.
You must have boys.
I mean, well, yeah, all of them, they accept it and find peace with it. And the older we get, the harder we are, the more of a struggle that becomes, I think.
Now, I don't know, all of your kids, does any of that come through the foster system, or has this been like an adoption where a mom just was not capable, ready to mother a child, or is there some foster stuff involved in there as well?
Yeah. I'll briefly summarize the next stage of our story. So as I said before, we had our first daughter through adoption, an open adoption, and that was a great experience. And one of those classic first parenting experiences where it's so good, we're like, we could do this again. We could have more kids. Of course, this is easy. This is wonderful. And she's an amazing child, and still is to this day. I love her. And she was one of those easy kids that life just on every level got better when she was around. And so we signed up to pursue adoption again, and we were waiting a little while when we decided it would be, we felt compelled to start looking into foster care. And we had talked about it before, but this time we got serious about it. And we were still waiting to adopt again, but we pursued becoming a licensed foster care family. And in the summer of 2020, we officially got licensed. And in truth, we weren't even licensed yet. The paperwork wasn't even finalized when 2 boys were placed in our home. And my understanding is that it's not too uncommon to have placements come quite quickly as soon as one is open to a placement. And so we had these 2 boys who were the youngest of 6 children, a family of 6 kids, all of whom had been removed that day from their family. And there was no place that could take more than one. So the older 4 all went to 4 different foster care homes, and the youngest 2 ended up with us. And so we took in those 2 boys, at the time, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so we adjusted to having 3 kids in the home, and we had them in our home for 2 weeks when the original birth mother of our daughter contacted us and said, actually a member of her family contacted us on her behalf and said that she was pregnant again. And would we be willing to adopt that child? And so we were just adjusting to having 3 kids in the home. We said, this is the biological sibling of our daughter. Absolutely. We will adopt this child, and that will be a blessing. And then a week later, she found out it was twins. And then they were born shortly after that. And so within a span of 4 weeks, we went from 1 kid to 5 kids. And that was quite an adjustment. And all during the summer of 2020, which was an interesting time for all of us for other reasons. And so that was a bit of a ride. And like I said, it took a little while to adjust to that group. And then skipping ahead to this spring, basically the same thing happened again, only even less notice. I came home from work one day, and my wife, after hearing about the day that I had, because it was an interesting day, she said, "That's nice. I mean, our birth mother had a baby this morning, and we need to talk about whether we're willing to adopt this one too. And which we did. We took that baby home too, but that baby was born that morning. And so that brought our group to 6 children. That brings us to today, I think.
Yeah, I think that means that question about what kind of crazy we were talking about is, you're both kinds of crazy, both getting there and having been there to get to where you're at for sure. It's wow.
Yeah.
I mean, 1.5, that's a jump, man. That's a jump.
And that's when I said it wasn't exactly the plan. We said definitely like another kid, 2 kids. Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's have a sibling for our beautiful daughter. 3. Okay. We can manage that. Wait, 5. Okay. Hold on. 6. When's this going to end? Now it's all just jokes. Everyone in our life making those wisecracks that are not actually that funny to us about when is she going to stop having kids? Because at this point she's raising 3 children and we're raising 4 of her children that she has given birth to. And so that's the split in our family. We have 4 given birth by the same mother and 2 by a different mother. And going back to your other question about open relationships, that's one of the interesting dynamics in our family at this time, where 4 of our children come from a birth family that we do and will continue to have a strong, vibrant relationship with. And we want to see those birth siblings and those birth parents and those birth aunts and uncles. We want to see them, and we will. On the other hand, the 2 boys we took in through foster care, that's not exactly the same situation. And that puts us in a situation where we feel a little conflicted, because we are advocates of open relationships. And we believe it is important for kids to have some kind of a relationship, at least to answer their questions, at least to wrestle with their questions of identity. And these 2 foster children come from a situation that we don't really want to engage directly with more than we have to. They were forcibly removed from situations for good reason. Now we'll have a continued relationship with the 4 other older siblings who are in other foster homes right now. All of them. Logistically, it's challenging to coordinate visits with all of these different kids in all of these different foster homes, but we manage. But the parents, that's another story. We're still navigating that. Yeah,
that's something that we've experienced, is figuring out how to place the right judgment in the right place and how we handle this, because unfortunately for our kids, we don't have any of what you would call a safe and healthy environment where they could have those relationships. I don't know about your situation. Our situations have almost always involved a lot of drugs. And, unfortunately, when you deal with drug addiction, you deal with a lot of poor choices. I mean, you also deal with things like, people get drugs in their house because they deal with a drug dealer somewhere along the lines. And that's not always, like Uber Eats doesn't bring you that. Right. You tend to deal with some unsavory characters in that. And, that's been some of the stuff that we've dealt with. There's been some gang affiliation. There's been some other, just troubling things that just aren't safe. And it's horrible for us to look at it that way and realize that, because of that, we cannot give the kids those answers to those questions that they want. One particular kid who's he has lots of questions that he would ask his birth mom, but it's not necessarily a safe place where we can go to have those questions answered for him because of the situation. And it sucks for him, to be honest. It really does. But as parents, our job is to moderate that in the best possible way through the whole thing. And that's been a challenge for us. Is that something you guys have had to work through, as far as dealing with those sorts of things with drug addictions, or is there other stuff there, or what is the thing that allows you to decide whether or not it's a safe place to build that relationship?
Yeah, I think different, but relatable. We're with our foster children. Their parental rights were terminated only several months ago. this year. And we still, until the adoption is finalized, we don't actually get to see the case file. And so we have what our caseworker has told us. So we know a lot about their situation, but we don't know all the details. And we've even been perhaps guided maybe by a caseworker that you can't unsee what you see, and maybe reading the case file could be something you consider doing or not doing when the time comes. But that aside, we know that there were abusive situations for these kids and the older siblings, especially the older siblings, and they went through some very hard things, but different situations. But we definitely consider, for us in our household, a lot of it is the contrast between the experience that some of our kids will get versus some other kids. And we want every kid in the household to have an equally supportive and positive upbringing and overall experience growing up in our household. That's not easy when some are in different situations that are a little bit more complicated. We come with a lot more strings attached and causes for concern. So the birth parents are generally people that we don't want to have a relationship, that we don't want our kids to have to be with, especially unsupervised. And that's not the case for, as I said, for the other kids, where we will have ongoing relationship with them. And there will come a point where the kids will raise those questions, why we spent so much time with their birth family and not with mine. They're not old enough to be asking those questions quite so much, but it will come, I'm sure. And we'll have to navigate that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of our kids have, when I talk about dangerous situations, some of our kids were actually present when their father was murdered over a drug deal gone kind of sideways, from what I've read of the reports. And so, stuff like that, it's true danger. This is just, not just trying to villainize the people in their lives. And, don't want to do that at all. But there are some things that just are flat not safe. And I would not put my wife or my own biological kids in that kind of danger, and I won't put them in that same kind of danger. And it's difficult for them to understand that, because you are dealing with kids who have a limited ability to understand these things.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And this is something we're still figuring out. I don't know how we're going to wrestle with that when the time comes.
Yeah, that part is really challenging, because, one particular kid that I'm thinking of, he's got a lot of questions, and he deserves some answers to those questions, but I don't know that he'll ever get them, because, why is the big question in his mind, and I totally understand it. And, that even if you could ask that question, let's be honest, these kids' biological family most likely never intended to end up in a situation like they ended up in. They never intended on getting into a place where Children's Division or DFS or whatever agency, the particular state has, came into their life and terminated the parental rights. They ended up in a situation through usually a handful of bad choices. It just went sideways, and they couldn't control it. They lost their ability to control it, And so, keeping those connections where you can is awesome. But, the littlest one who's staying with us right now, who just woke up from her nap, I could hear her a little bit ago. I don't know if everybody else heard her, but she has, I believe, 6 siblings through her mom's side and 4 siblings through her dad's side that are, as far as I know, in the system right now, somewhere along the line, whether they're adopted out or in the foster care system. And so she's got like a lot of biological siblings out there. There's no way that we can keep up with visits for one kid for 10 other siblings. Impossible.
Right. Yeah. Good luck.
Even if you don't have a day job, that's an impossible task. Because as far as I understand it, most of those kids are in separate placements. Although, some of them may be together. I don't really know all the details, because, like you mentioned, we don't get all of the details from the caseworkers. We just, we got a phone call and said, hey, there's a baby that needs a place to stay, and you don't have anything in your crib right now. Do you mind if we fill that?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, because people don't always understand how this works. I love how you mentioned, your wife, you come home from wife and she's like, oh yeah, nice day. Now, by the way, we're gonna I pulled up at my house one day after a day of work, and I rode my motorcycle to work. I come riding home, and I'm pull up in the driveway. My wife's sitting there, and she has this look on her face like she has something to say. And so I shut the motor off, and she says, hey, you mind if we go pick up a baby here in about an hour and a half? And I went,
Hope you didn't have evening plans.
yeah. And it was an hour and a half because it was an hour and a half drive away to go pick him up. But yeah, that's what it ended up being. And so sometimes we just get handed a kid. If you don't get the whole story, you don't get all the background, you don't know all the details, all the parts. And oftentimes once they do, you do get the story that they know, you only get a small piece of it because the caseworkers only know what they've heard so far.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Does this kid have any exposure to drugs, any exposure to different types of, whether it's physical or sexual and mental abuse? Do they have behaviors that show up? None of those are questions that are guaranteed to be answered. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very true.
And it's made us pretty decent detectives when it comes to just dealing with some of these things to try and help kids out. Like, where's this kid at? One young guy, and I talk about him a lot. For the people who've never seen me, I have more than a couple tattoos, and he's tattooed over here on my chest. And but when he showed up, like, we had very little story at all. But he was such a sweet young guy, and he had been through so much that if you gave him a cup of water, you were his best friend. Like, he wasn't treated with that much kindness apparently in his birth home. And so he would just open right up, and we could tell, like, certain types of, like, he never gave a story about, he was, how old was he? He was, I want to say 2 years old when he came to stay with us. Maybe it was 3. Developmentally, he was a little bit behind because he wasn't really speaking hardly at all at that point, but you could tell certain things caused a lot of trauma, and we had to become detectives just to know what he'd been through so we could adjust how we would handle those situations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have to.
And then come to find out, like, there had been a lot of abuse around diaper changes for him. And
wow.
And that made it very significant because turns out kids who are in diapers need them suckers changed on a regular basis.
Yes, I know. Yes.
Yeah, I bet you do. You've got a lot of little ones. I imagine you probably have like a black belt in diaper changing by now, don't you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just 2 at once. Come on.
I don't think I've ever even had to do 2 at once. So mad props to you for that skill. I don't have that very badge on my belt yet. But yeah, just figuring out as a responsible adult who's trying to care for a kid who comes from a hard place, how do I handle these hard moments with these kids when I don't know what's going on? So what's that been like for you guys, figuring that stuff out as you go along the road? I know it sounds like you've got some kids who've experienced some significant different types of abuse. Has that been something that you guys have gotten pretty good at seeing and understanding and working around those problems with them?
Oh, all these situations. Yeah, these are the dilemmas and the reasons to remain a loyal subscriber to a great podcast like this and continue to get great insights, of course. So
yeah, I need all the help I can get. I'm looking for advice here because some days I suck too.
Yeah, I know. But kudos to you for providing a great resource to this community. I think that there's a lot that we've learned in this short period of time that we've been working within the system, and we've learned a little bit that it's important to remember we aren't doctors, and we do need to be careful about diagnosing our children's issues and explaining their behaviors when, as you said so well, we have so little information to go on, and it's easy to take those little nuggets of information that we have and extrapolate that and draw maybe the wrong conclusions. It's all too easy to do that with the best of intentions, and we've learned to be a little bit careful about that. And we've had some takeaways from the two foster boys that were placed in our home being very different, and we eventually learned that they have the same birth mother, but they have different birth fathers, and they're strikingly different in personality. And one has a lot of behaviors, a lot of challenging behaviors, very challenging, and in ways that I think you could relate, because you've talked a little bit about in previous episodes about having children with very impulsive behavior and so on, and some of that we attributed to perhaps traumatic experiences, and later learned a little bit more, which helped us attribute more of that to probably an ADHD diagnosis, which we discovered their older siblings, the four who have the same biological father as this child, have that diagnosis and are already medicated for that because they're older. This child was just too young to be diagnosed for that. And we learned a little bit more about what those diagnoses typically entail, and what the signs of this condition might be, and what actual signs are of trauma. And there can be an overlap. There's like a Venn diagram of what trauma can produce and what ADHD can produce, and they can be the diagnosis can be perhaps misconstrued in a lot of cases. And we actually discovered that what we thought was trauma was probably ADHD with this child, and the other child actually was exhibiting behaviors that were probably due to trauma that we were missing, that we didn't understand until we actually started to learn a lot more. Those were much more subtle, and not as disruptive and in your face as the behaviors of the other child that we were constantly struggling with. Meanwhile, this other kid who's not as loud, not as boisterous, not throwing tantrums, not getting in her hair constantly. This other child who's over here is exhibiting behaviors that we could attribute to perhaps past traumatic experiences. And those actually do need to be handled, but in very different ways. These are brothers, but their issues are dramatically different, which is a theme across the household with all these kids from different situations who each have completely unique challenges, and our approach must be so different for everyone, which I'm sure, again, you can relate to very well.
100%. Yeah. I joke and say that I've got, one little guy who, like, DSM-5 needs to be revised to have like an ADHD premium level. Say that's my little guy. Like, this kid is, and the thing is that I hate for anybody to hear that and think I mean that in a bad way, because it's not in a bad way. Like, this kid, when he is up, oh my gosh, he is the happiest kid you've ever met. When he is like really almost not quite manic, like, this kid is as happy as you ever met, and he's so much fun. Much fun. Now, when he has his down moments, yes, we have to be aware of that as well. But as you mentioned, the kids can be so different. Their experiences, their biology, all the way that they respond. Even two kids with the same biology and the same stimulus will react differently sometimes. And so, we've got one who's dealt a lot with dissociation, and that's the exact other side of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And I go, Now, if you just look at the outworking of it, look at the end result, when they're both having a bad moment, it just looks like two angry boys who decided, let's go duel it out, And I don't know about your house, Kyle, but the house I grew up in, I had a brother, and we did some of that too. And we didn't have any excuses other than we were just boys doing what boys do. So sometimes it's hard to diagnose all that and realize what we're dealing with, and understand the difference between when you're dealing with a diagnosis, when you're dealing with some traumatic stuff, or when you're dealing with kids just being kids. Because sometimes even well-adjusted kids who come from, loving, safe homes that have no reason to act like little maniacs will act like little maniacs, and they have to be dealt with occasionally,
Yeah.
Now we didn't have any of that problem in my house growing up because I was always a good kid, and I just, good thing my mom's not here. She'd tell stories, but since she's not here, I'll just claim I was the angel, and my brother was the problem. And it's a good thing he's not here either. He probably has some stories to tell. But it's such a challenge to figure all this stuff out, man. And then people look at you like you're crazy when you're in the middle of Walmart or the grocery store and a kid starts to have a meltdown and you're like, whoa, hang on. And you're trying to deal with one kid in the middle of their emotional breakdown. And you have 2, 3, maybe 5 more kids with you that you're trying to manage the whole group as a whole. And you can't manage them all the same way. It doesn't work.
That's absolutely true.
How have you been able to work through some of that where when you have those moments and you have there's 2 of you and 6 of them, zone defense works great sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we're going to call. We're going to go cover 2, nickel formation. You blitz and I'm going to take the rear. I think it takes real strategy. Real strategy. You have to get pretty detailed and be pretty intentional because we've learned enough that we know we can't just autopilot this. We can't just parent based on our emotional reactions and our gut in the moment. We actually have to be thoughtful and strategic and think ahead and learn a lot about each individual child. And we have a couple of children who are similar, a couple who come from the same birth parents and exhibit similar behaviors. And so there's one girl who's 2 right now, and when her older sister was 2, she was behaving in the same manner, and we feel, we kind of remember going through this, and here's what worked in that situation. And so we can learn from that with another child, and this is what a whole lot of families get to go through. They're in different situations than us, but as you said, that's not quite the case that we're in, with everyone dealing with such very different issues. We have a kid who is quiet and stews on everything. It can be moody, and another kid whose emotions are on his sleeves, and another kid who can be high highs and low lows, and one day is amazing and the next day is terrible. And just, these are very different children. And
are you living in my house?
Yeah. It's therapeutic to get to talk with some. It's so hard in our normal lives to find people who we can relate to, which is really one, not to dodge your question or anything, or to rabbit hole or anything here, but one of the unforeseen burdens or challenges in this process is just there's so much that I can go through in my life that most people can relate. I lost a job this year. That's tough. I'm going through a different, I lost my grandparents last year. We all go through those things. This is something that no one in my life that I work with, go to church with, see at the co-working space, or see at the store or in the neighborhood, no one relates to these challenges specifically until I engage with the specific community of this kind, like Foster Care Nation. And that is that makes one feel isolated and lonely and lost at times. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because as dads, we're supposed to have it figured out, right? We're fixers. That's what we're wired to do, and you can't fix some of this stuff. Most of the stuff you don't. Not only do you not get to fix it, it's not your right to fix it. It's their struggle, it's their trauma, and you're not supposed to try and fix it for them. And that's been one of the hardest things I've had to do, is realize that I don't have the right or the responsibility to fix these problems for these kids. The only thing, and I mean the only thing, that I found that I can be successful at is just creating an environment where they can be safe enough to begin to heal some of these issues on their own time. And that on their own time piece is hard.
Yeah. That's extremely important and spot on. That's, I think, what we're called to do. That's all that can be asked of us, I think.
So I'm curious, you guys got into this foster and adoptive space. I know you mentioned the infertility as a reason why you originally looked at it. I also happen to know that a lot of people find their way here through their own religious beliefs. Is that a part of your is your spirituality a part of the reason why you guys have looked into this world?
I think I can't deny that it was a contributing factor. There's no question about it. As I said before, it was a part of our family story. We adoption was a part of our lives, but it was also a part of our life. Coming into 2014, it was in the winter of 2014 that we actually, for the first time ever, we had known about it and thought about it, but for the first time ever, we attended the annual March for Life in Washington, D.C. in January that year. And the theme was adoption, the theme of everything. And so was a lot of talk about that and a lot of advocacy for adoption and education about adoption. And so that was around the time that we were really struggling, and it undoubtedly, like, it inspired us to have serious conversations for the first time, confront something that was easy to kind of like push to the side and neglect and procrastinate and not talk about because it was an unhappy topic. That brought it to the forefront and forced us to talk about it, and that led us on the journey that we left on since then.
Yeah, I thought I knew where I was heading in my life, and at one point, I joke about this sometimes. At one point, I knew my oldest son was going to turn 18 when I was 41 years old. And at that point, we were going to be empty nesters, and like we were going to have a paycheck all to ourselves and have time all to ourselves. We'd have room in a house like to ourselves.
Goodness.
And we'd have time and money to go do things, go see the world. My wife is her family is from Ireland, and so like she would love to go spend a week in Ireland and stay in a castle and do all the cool stuff, and we were going to be able to do all that at 41 years old. That's pretty young.
Sounds great.
Doesn't it? Here in a couple of days I turn 45. And,
yeah.
and we're staring down, another little one at this point, and I'm going, somewhere along the line, something changed in me to where my goals in life definitely changed.
Yeah.
And it went from that idea that I thought we were going to have all this amazing, cool stuff to no. I've got a job. God put me here for a reason, and I'm going to do that instead of just go visit Ireland. And that for that 1 week we're going to go blow a $5,000 bill to go hang out and see what a different part of the world is like. And now we've got a job that we've chosen to do. It doesn't really pay, put in air quotes, pay well, hardly even covers the cost. It really usually doesn't cover the cost when you look at foster care.
True.
I don't know about your state, but our state is the second lowest paid state in the nation. And so we basically are feeding and housing and clothing and loving on kids on just over $200 a month, which is not a lot. Never raised a kid.
Yeah, for that audience, that segment of your audience who has no kids yet. Just so you know, warning, it costs more than that.
And I have bad news, Kyle. You have boys, and they're going to get older, and it gets a lot more expensive at the grocery store before long.
Goodness. I mean, I'm still young. I remember being a teenager and just always feeling hungry, always. And the time when we ordered pizza, you just needed a single pizza per person, per teenager, one pizza.
Yes.
There's no sharing. It's. I know that's coming. That's a little ways off, and I don't know. But I mean, I relate to what you're talking about. There were goals and visions that we had. We definitely like the idea of having a big family. We both grew up in big families, but when we had our first child, that first couple of years was really special, and it was really easy. That was kind of like our honeymoon period, and in so many ways, it was easy, it was fun, and we did things like we went to Europe, and we spent like 6 weeks just like living in Budapest for a while, and I just went to work at a co-working space, and my wife, would take our daughter to the park every day, and we thought, this is great. We should do that. We should just continue to do this every year, just like go somewhere new and just like live there for a while and travel, because I work remotely, and we can manage to do this. That's great. And then, maybe we could do that with 2 kids. We could probably still do that with 2 kids. We can't do that with 6 kids. I'm just telling you right now. There's no way. And I'm a big believer. I'm a huge advocate for travel. I think it's like, I feel like we have an ethical obligation to extend, to visit beyond the borders of our town and get some perspective, that healthy perspective. I feel like it's a part of education. It's not just like that recreation that I want to do when I retire. It's the healthy perspective that we get. And I want to take my kids other places so that they grow up understanding that the world is a bigger place and what other people go through outside of our town. But it is a lot harder. It's a lot less realistic at this point.
Oh yeah. We there's a big festival about an hour and a half away from us they do every year, and we'd never been up there. So this last weekend we went up there and took the kids up there, and yeah, it was a good time and all, but I'm going to be honest, an hour and a half car ride with all those kids and all those things that bounce around between their ears, because I'm not certain there's always brain neurons firing in there, but that's kids in general. But we've got plenty of stuff going on, and man, an hour and a half car rides, that's a journey sometimes when you have many kids, right?
You're absolutely right. It really is. Yes.
Because I think we had 6 kids with us. One of our older boys who's left home, who's grown older and like actually made it out on his own and is successful and has launched into the world. Yay. We're so happy about that. He wanted to go up there with us, and he really didn't want to spend the money for gas. He's gotten old enough to realize just how expensive gas is sometimes. So it's like, I'll go with you guys if I can ride with you. And and our daughter brought a friend with her. But a ride like that for an hour and a half can be such an adventure, to where travel outside of the country or out to Europe or somewhere else, that's not even on our radar anymore.
I know.
I've decided we're going to take that big trip sometime after all the kids are out of the house, and we've decided to retire somewhere around 70 or 80 years old, maybe.
Gosh, Jason.
My family does not have the health history to indicate that I'm ever going to leave the States at that point.
Oh no.
Yeah. But like I said, we do it because we come from a place where we both have a reason why we feel like we're here. This is what God put us on earth to do. So what is it that has you and your wife doing this job? Is this something that you guys have a calling towards, or is this just something that you stepped into and decided that this is the right place for you?
I wish I had a great story or a way to summarize this. It's the kind of thing that it's hard to put into words. It's a feeling really that we can do this and maybe we should, but it's not that we don't want to either. It isn't just a sense of obligation like maybe we would feel towards giving to a charity that is or a worthy cause. It feels right, but this feels like we have everything. We have all the means, we have the love, we have the stability, we have the space, we have the community, we have all that is necessary to provide for children, and that is also what we want to do. We want to raise children, and we are in the prime of our life right now when we can. We have the energy to do it. Sometimes it feels like we just barely do, but we do. At the end of the day, we really do, and so it feels right.
I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit jealous if you have the energy, because I don't have that anymore.
It's hard. It is hard. I'm still getting up in the middle of the night every night and feeding a baby and changing a baby, and sleep is there's never as much as you would like, and the kids are exhausting and relentless, especially at this age when every one of them, all 6 of them, are in car seats and not a one of them can do a whole lot on their own. It's very tiring. It really is. But we're still young. We're still quite young. We're still in our early 30s, and I do my best to keep physically active. I try hard, but there's not a lot of margin for error. One of us gets sick or injured or incapacitated in any way. It kind of, the house of cards comes tumbling down. But so far, we're managing.
Well, you just keep that up, because I keep trying to convince myself I'm still young, and my kids keep pointing out all the gray hairs that pop in on the side there. And there's a reason the hair on the side of my head shaved off. That's where most of the white's showing up.
It's showing up here too, and it's coming fast. I'm a little concerned.
Well, it's a good thing I'm married and I don't have to worry about being attractive for any women nowadays, because I've given up on the looks. That's the first thing that when I went, yep, I don't even have time for that sort of stuff anymore. All of your energy goes to taking care of this stuff, and it's a full-time calling for those of us who do it, for sure. So I'm just super glad to meet guys like you who you and your wife have put this together as a home that was not just for one kid, but maybe even surprisingly enough to you as well, for 6 kids. That's a big deal, man.
Yeah. It's been a blessing. It's been great for everyone involved. And these are at the end of the day, they're wonderful kids with a bright future. This is probably what I keep telling myself, comforting myself. This is probably the hardest part, right? It can't get much harder than this, right? 6 kids in car seats and have them in diapers right now. It can't get much harder than this. It's going to be easier after this, right? You're telling me it's going to be easier, right, Jason?
I have 3 words for you. No, 2 words. 6 teenagers. Yeah.
Come on. They can buckle their own seatbelts. They can tie their own shoes at that point, I hope.
Yeah, if you know many teen boys, you start to wonder sometimes.
Okay. We'll shoot for most of them. Most of them, by the time they're teenagers, are tying their shoes, buckling their seatbelts, putting their shirt on the right way, and not dumping their entire plate of food on their lap and so on.
Yeah. Well, and I joke around about the teenage stuff because, at one point I was talking with a friend of mine, and, the whole like teen girl thing. I was like, I've got this little girl. She's just so cute and sweet, but I know she's going to be a teen girl at some point. And this guy was a few years ahead of me on his journey. And he's like, you really have to be careful what you're putting in your head about that, because, he's like, they're amazing. They're wonderful. Like he has a great relationship with his girls, and they've been through a lot of difficult trauma themselves. His wife committed suicide when they were very young. And so he's walked with teenage daughters through the aftermath of that. And he kind of challenged my mindset on it. And he was right. Like, if I'm going to be honest, and I hate to say this too often because I know once in a while she listens. My teenage daughter is one of the easiest kids I've had to raise so far.
Yeah.
She's just a good kid. I mean,
that's wonderful.
Yeah. And it all starts with all those ideas that teenagers are so hard. And yeah, I mean, personally, I'm wired for little ones. I'm just going to say that. My wife will tell you it's because I am kind of a 4-year-old at heart myself. And so it's really easy for me to jump in the game with them.
That's so sweet.
But there's a lot of truth to that. But, we have to know that we've got some stuff. Yeah, teen years have some hard stuff, and it's tough watching kids go through that. But, as long as you walk through it with the heart that you guys have, like you don't have the scary stuff there. You're trying to take care of kids, you're helping kids, and you keep that as your goal in life. And man, it's a tough journey, but it's worth it. It really is.
Yeah. And I love that message too, that maybe the best thing for us all isn't to be bracing ourselves and holding our breath, preparing for what is inevitably going to be extremely difficult. And there are parallels even at this stage in our journey as we sign up for adoption and sign up for foster care and welcome these kids into our home. Like the best thing for them isn't for us to be bracing ourselves and holding our breath and being prepared for the worst, but instead to be setting aside all of that, all those fears and concerns and anxieties, and that I'm sure I'll be having as they approach teenage years, setting aside those and appreciating the positives and the blessings and all the wonderful qualities of these kids, and just focusing on those, and hoping for the best, and just cherishing them.
Oh yeah. The only thing I will say is as bad as you expect it'll be is when you get to teach them all how to drive, because been there, done that. And I've got my daughter who has been such a great kid is going to expect me to teach her how to drive real soon. She's about to get her permit, and I'm a little bit scared. I've been in a passenger in a car before, and I don't like that seat. Like it at all. But it's just another step on the journey of trying to get these kids where they can go out and live an amazing life. I mean, at some point my dad had to put up with me driving him around. So
that's right. Maybe there will just be self-driving cars by the time my kids are teenagers, and I won't have to worry about it. Right.
You give me a little hope with that thought.
maybe what if there's a generation will come that won't have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a professional driver by trade. That's what I do every day. So I'm not a good passenger typically anyways. I don't care how good of a driver you are, but when you're teaching a kid to drive, and I've got the whole like professional driver in my head. I've got 1,000 things I'm thinking about when I drive. And I think I cause anxiety when my kids are trying to learn.
Oh, that's just exactly what they need when they're behind the wheel.
Right. Yeah. So that's been my struggles. But, Kyle, thanks for coming in today and telling you guys a story. You guys have an amazing story. And I can only hope that there will be lots of people who will hear your story and realize that, hey, man, I don't have to be somebody with a bunch of specialized training. These guys sound like they were just interested in helping kids, and they've been doing it. And that's amazing. And so I appreciate you sharing your story here and just giving some hope to people that there's even if infertility is maybe in their life, like there's a way forward.
Well, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that. It's been a pleasure to get to come on your wonderful show, and I hope you continue to do this and bring all these lessons and stories to this community of other people going through similar struggles who need to hear these stories, who need to relate to others, and it's been valuable for me to get to listen to you, and I'm privileged to get to be a part of the show.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, Foster Care Nation, thank you for listening to Kyle's story. Now take his knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you'd like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at jason@fostercarenation.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. And don't forget, we have an account at Buy Me a Coffee. It's like a virtual tip jar where you can help us fund our mission for as little or as much as you want. It's at buymeacoffee.com/fostercare. The links to everything are in the show notes, in your podcast player, or at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
You are so super awesome. I think you guys are cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Unparalleled Studios.